My name is Christine Andler, and I'm 34 years old. The night my sister called me screaming at 2 a.m., I was already awake. I had been awake for hours, actually, sitting in my apartment with a half-eaten birthday cake on the kitchen counter and my phone face down on the couch. It was our birthday. Mine and Vanessa's. We were born on the same day, 3 years apart, and for most of our lives, that fact was treated like a fun family coincidence. But that year, the year I turned 34 and Vanessa turned 31, it stopped feeling like a coincidence and started feeling like a curse. It had started 6 months earlier, when my mother called me during my lunch break with that particular tone in her voice, the soft, careful one she uses when she's about to say something she knows will hurt. She told me that the family was planning something special for Vanessa's birthday. A venue. A catered dinner. A real celebration. My mother kept using the word special, and I kept waiting for her to say, and for you too, but that part never came. When I finally asked directly, she said it quietly, like she was hoping the words would land softly. We can only afford one party this year, Christine. You understand, don't you? I said yes. I said I understood. I hung up the phone and sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could make myself go back inside the office. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say in that moment, was that this wasn't the first time. It wasn't even close to the first time. Vanessa had always been the one the family rallied around. She was the younger one, the one who struggled more openly, the one whose tears seemed to move people in a way mine never did. I had learned early to be self-sufficient, to not ask for too much, to be the daughter who was doing fine. Being fine, I discovered over decades, is a quiet way of becoming invisible. I told myself I was over it. I was 34 years old. I had my own life, my own friends, my own paycheck. I didn't need my parents to throw me a party. But there's a difference between not needing something and being completely fine with its absence, and I had spent years confusing those two things. The party happened on a Saturday in early March. $12,000. I know the number because my cousin texted me a photo of the venue, and I looked it up myself. Candles everywhere, a live string quartet for the cocktail hour, a 4-course dinner for 60 guests, a custom cake that cost more than my first car. 60 guests. Family members I hadn't seen in years. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my childhood friends who had stayed close to the family, all there, all dressed up, all celebrating Vanessa while I spent our shared birthday reorganizing my kitchen cabinets and pretending I didn't care. My cousin, bless her, called me from the parking lot before the dinner started. She whispered into the phone that it felt wrong, that she almost hadn't come, that she couldn't believe I wasn't there. I told her it was fine. I used that word again. Fine. She didn't sound convinced, and, honestly, neither was I. What happened next is the part one didn't plan. A few weeks after the party, once I had quietly processed my feelings enough to function normally around my family again, I started making my own arrangements. Not out of revenge, or at least, that's what I told myself. I told myself it was simply about self-respect. About deciding that if my birthday was going to be celebrated, I was going to be the one to do it. I reached out to people I actually loved. Friends from college. Colleagues who had become real friends over the years. A few family members who I knew genuinely cared about me. I booked a private room at a restaurant I loved, put together a guest list of about 30 people, and planned an evening that actually reflected who I was. And here is where things get complicated. Here is where the story stops being about a birthday party and starts being about something older and deeper and much harder to resolve. Because some of the people I invited were the same people who had attended Vanessa's party. Mutual friends. Shared family. People who loved us both but had, on our actual birthday, shown up for her and not for me. And when those invitations went out, when people started RSVPing yes, when word quietly spread that Christine was having her own celebration, something shifted. Something that had been carefully balanced for years began to tilt. I didn't know any of that yet on the night of my party. I just knew it was the best birthday I'd had in years. I laughed until my face hurt. I danced when no one expected me to. I blew out candles on a cake I had chosen myself, surrounded by people who had shown up specifically for me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. And then, 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, my phone lit up with Vanessa's name. I almost didn't answer. It was 2 a.m., and I had work in the morning, and some part of me already knew, the way you know things in your body before your mind catches up, that whatever was on the other side of that call was not going to be simple. But I answered, because she was my sister, because we shared a birthday, because 34 years of habit don't dissolve overnight no matter how much has changed between two people. She was screaming before I even finished saying hello. Not upset screaming. Not crying screaming. Full, white-hot, furious screaming, the kind that fills a room even through a phone speaker. She called me calculating. She called me manipulative. She said I had deliberately planned my party to humiliate her, that I had handpicked guests from her celebration to make a point, that I had gone out of my way to make her look bad in front of people who mattered to her. She said our mother was devastated. She said our father couldn't believe what I had done. She said everyone was talking about it, comparing the two parties, asking why Christine wasn't at Vanessa's dinner, and that I had created a narrative that made the entire family look cruel. She said all of this in the kind of voice that expects silence on the other end, the kind of voice that has always received silence from me, and for the first 10 seconds, out of pure reflex, that's exactly what she got. And then something in me went very still and very clear. I waited for her to take a breath, and when she did, I spoke. I didn't match her volume. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain myself the way I had been explaining myself my entire life, carefully and quietly, making sure not to take up too much space. I simply said, Vanessa, our family spent $12,000 on your birthday. On our birthday. And nobody called to ask if I was okay with that. Nobody called to say happy birthday to me that night. Not mom. Not dad. Not you. The screaming stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my 34 years. It was the silence of something being said for the very first time that had needed to be said for decades. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't healing, not yet. But it was honest, and honesty, I had recently learned, has a weight to it that comfort simply doesn't. Vanessa said I was being dramatic. She said I had always been taken care of, that I was the stable one, the successful one, that I didn't need the same thing she needed. And there it was. There was the thing I had watched shape my entire family dynamic since childhood, spoken plainly at last. I didn't need things. I was fine. Christine is fine. She always lands on her feet. Christine doesn't make a fuss. Being capable had been quietly used as permission to overlook me, and somehow along the way, I had accepted that arrangement without ever consciously agreeing to it. I told her that being capable doesn't mean being undeserving. I told her that I had never once begrudged her the support she needed, that I had celebrated her genuinely, that I had showed up for her repeatedly and without conditions. But that I was also a person. That I also had a birthday. That the year our parents chose to spend $12,000 celebrating one of us and made the other one feel like an afterthought was a year I was allowed to feel hurt about. I wasn't asking her to feel guilty. I wasn't trying to take anything away from her. I was just telling the truth. She hung up without responding. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that, waiting for the guilt to arrive the way it always had before, that familiar sinking feeling of having caused trouble, of having disrupted the peace, of having been too much. But the guilt didn't come. What came instead was something quieter and more unfamiliar. Something that took me a while to identify because I hadn't felt it in so long. It was relief. In the weeks that followed, things were tense. My mother called twice, both times with that same careful voice, trying to smooth things over without actually addressing what had happened. My father sent a text that was clearly meant to be diplomatic, but mostly just said he hoped everyone could move forward. Vanessa didn't call again. And I stopped performing fine when I wasn't. I stopped shrinking. I stopped accepting the role that had been assigned to me before I was old enough to question it. Here is what I want anyone listening to take away from this, because I know I am not the only person who has lived this particular story with different names and different details. Being the strong one in your family is not a personality trait. It is not a destiny. It is not a reason to be forgotten on your birthday or any other day. You are allowed to need things. You are allowed to celebrate yourself when no one else will. You are allowed to tell the truth even when it makes people uncomfortable, even when it disrupts a peace that was only ever comfortable for everyone except you. Self-respect is not selfishness. Knowing your own worth is not an attack on anyone else. I turned 34 surrounded by people who chose to show up for me. And this year, for the first time in a long time, that was enough. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever been the one in your family who was expected to simply understand, please subscribe to this channel. There are more stories here, real ones, honest ones, and every single week we show up for people who deserve to feel seen. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and know that you are never as alone in your experience as you might think. We will see you in the next one.